build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to all 14 of you. Muffy, Karen, Sanderson, Sharon Edwards from Indiana, Robin Garlick from Vermont, Sighing G07. Good to see you all. Yeah, this is just something that I'm kind of interested in. I covered the Laurie Vallow trial in person in Boise. Well, certainly 59 people in. Anyway, good to see you. We're going to basically just review trial day 1 and 2. So we're going to jump across all the gaps. So this should be quite a cohesive bit of coverage. If they're boring parts, we'll skip through those as well. But before we even get started, I just want to, Heidi, good to see you. Lord's Girl, Beth Forbes, good to see all of you. Linda Waikiyama, hi from Japan, good to see you. So something that I think we need to think about is Laurie is defending herself for the second time, and doesn't one get an impression about her? It's almost like, will you never learn, right? Doesn't one also get? We've gotten to know her better and better, and isn't there kind of an impression that she really backs herself? She really thinks she is smarter than everyone in the room, and as a result, isn't that why she is where she is? Is Laurie someone that can admit her mistakes, would you say? If Laurie has made a mistake, and I think one could say yes, do you think she can admit it to herself? And if you respond enthusiastically, yes, that's her problem. She can't admit her own mistakes, that she's in denial, that she's on the wrong path, that she's on the wrong track, that she's her own worst enemy. I think what is really interesting with that whole thing isn't like pointing the finger at her. It is thinking about that and thinking, are we sometimes guilty of that? Are we sometimes very clear about what we want to do and we can't actually smell the coffee? Has that ever happened to you where you've been in a situation and perhaps you were the last to know that you perhaps should have done things differently? Tamara, good to see you. Blue Phoenix Rising, good to see you as well. Okay, so we're going to go to the trial coverage now. I see my dog wants to jump up onto my lap. Come on. Come, boy. Up. Come, boy. Come on. I'm not going to pick you up. Come. Come. Come on. There you go. He's actually just had a bit of a wash because he rolled in dung, dog dung. And so he was really smelling terrible, but now he's smelling a lot better. So anyway, Timmy, say hi. Timmy, hey. Timmy just wants to lie back. Okay, Timmy, lie back, relax, and the rest of you can do the same. And we're now going to deal with trial day 1, and let's see what comes up. You guys ready? Let's go to that now. By the way, greetings from a very cold South Africa. It's almost the middle of winter here. The middle of winter is literally 2 weeks away. That's like the middle of winter for us, the middle of summer for many of you. And then also, it's supposed to snow here on Monday, so it's going to be really, really cold. Okay, are you guys ready? We're going to go to opening arguments, opening statements. Let's see who does a better job. Who do you think will? Good Smith, good to see you.
Yes. Okay. So maybe an email.
Linda Hill, are you guys ready to jump in? Here we go.
Can be sent to Mr. White to see if, or even your paralegal that's now walking in could see if there's some way to coordinate picking up any documents that are needed. Or if they could even be digitally emailed over, if you need assistance printing them, we can do that too.
All right, are we ready for Trina K? There she is. She should be coming up any moment now. Muddled Jen, good to see you.
All right, please be seated.
Lord's
Members of the jury,
Girl.
welcome back.
Robin Garlic, Deanna Ryan, good to see you guys.
As you can see, we have extra jurors just in case someone can't proceed, which you observe that we already had to use or let one juror go. At this time, the state can proceed with its opening statement.
Thank you.
Trina K, the floor is yours.
A Jeep Wrangler. The Texas license plate, no rear tire, and dark tint was parked right up next to Brandon Boudreau's driveway. Idle. At 9:13 a.m. on October 2nd.
I just want to stop there and just add a little detail. Did you know that that Jeep was parked so obviously, explicitly, that it was actually a little bit difficult for Brandon Boudreau to get into his driveway, right? And he's going to be testifying in chief, in person, in a moment. So we'll get it from him as well.
2nd of 2019, Brandon Boudreau returned home. That Jeep had been idling there already for over an hour. When Brandon turned onto his street, he immediately noticed this Jeep because it was parked so close to his driveway. The back of the Jeep was facing towards him, and he immediately also noticed that there was no rear tire. He saw a Texas plate on the Jeep, and then he saw that back window of the Jeep open up.
Do you guys know what the significance is of the Texas plate, right? Lori used to live in Texas. The Jeep belonged to Tylee, and Charles gave the Jeep to Tylee, right? Is that right? Was it Charles, or I think it was Charles, right? And so that's why it's got Texas plates, is because it's basically Lori's family driving that Jeep, and now it literally is Lori's family driving the Jeep. It's Alex Cox who's driving it, right?
Rifle barrel come out and point at him. And then bang! He heard a shot and his window shattered right next to him. Brandon hit the accelerator and he took off.
I'm not going to interrupt her opening anymore, but I just want to mention that there is Ring doorbell footage that actually captures that bang. It is a really loud shot that is captured on the Ring footage, and that's going to be played, I think, on day 2.
He turned the corner and drove a block or so away and stopped, calling 911. He talked to the operator and told them where this Jeep was going. As Brandon was speaking with the 911 operator, he had no idea that that bullet had struck his car just a few inches from his head. You'll learn that in the back of that Jeep was this defendant's brother, Alex Cox. He had been lying in wait with a rifle for Brandon to return home. This defendant, Lori VALLOW TRIAL, the woman seated over here, had loaned her Jeep to her brother so he could drive it to Arizona, so he could be in the back of that Jeep with very dark tint that no one could see through and wait for Brandon to return home. The goal of this defendant and her co-conspirators: to shoot and kill Brandon Boudreau. So let's talk about October 2nd and the weeks leading up to that. all of the actions that this defendant did in furtherance of that conspiracy and the premeditated murder of Brandon Boudreaux. I'm going to start with a little background for you. In June of 2019, Brandon Boudreaux was still married to his then wife, Melanie. You're going to learn that Melanie is this defendant's niece. You're going to learn they were very close. And you're going to learn that they both had it out for Brandon. On June 25th, Brandon and Melanie got into an argument. And Brandon learned that this defendant had told his wife that he was gay, that he had hacked into her computer, and that Brandon was trying to work with her then husband to take her temple recommend away. You're going to learn that many of the people, including Brandon and this defendant, are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And having your temple recommend taken away is a very significant event. You're going to learn and see that Brandon actually texted Lori Vallow on the 25th of June to confront her about these lies, and that she never responded. By July, just a short while later, Brandon and Melanie were seeing a mediator and proceeding through a divorce. You're going to also hear that during this time, Lori Vallow and Alex Cox lived here in Arizona. In fact, Lori lived in Chandler. You're going to hear about an incident that occurred on July 11th of 2019 in Chandler involving Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. The Chandler police were out at this defendant's residence, and they took photographs of some vehicles. One of those vehicles was a 2018 Jeep Wrangler with Texas license plates, LWD 0997. That will be very important to you. They also noted that Alex had his own car, a Ford F-150. Both of those vehicles were in Chandler in July. You're going to learn that in August through September, Lori Vallow and her brother Alex Cox moved up to Rexburg, Idaho, to be closer to this defendant's soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell. Both of them moved into a complex at 565 Pioneer Road in Rexburg, Idaho. Lori took the Jeep Wrangler and a Nissan Rogue, and Alex brought his Ford F-150. So everyone had their own vehicles. You're going to learn that as the divorce is proceeding between Brandon and his then wife, Melanie, that they put their house up for sale. And Melanie moved out and got a rental property. When their house finally sold, Brandon had to rent a home too. And on September 13th of 2019, he rented a house at 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert. Brandon will tell you that his plan initially was to stay in his own house almost up to the time of the closing and then move into the rental property. You will see a text message that Melanie asked Brandon for his new address. They had children in common, so he didn't think anything of this. And he sent her the address. That was on September 17th. You'll learn that Melanie Boudreaux, this defendant's niece, was the only person who knew Brandon's address, who knew 3875 East Phelps Street, and who also knew this defendant and Alex Cox. Brandon barely moved into that house before the shooting. In fact, he'd moved in sooner than he thought because Melanie told him she was going out of town and offered him the kids for an extra weekend. And so he moved in sooner and took the kids while she flew to Rexburg, Idaho on September 26th through the 29th to be with this defendant. So in the weeks leading up to this October 2nd shooting, we'll talk about all of these things that were done in furtherance of this conspiracy, starting with Lori Vallow's Jeep. You'll learn that Alex Cox searched out a place to have extra window tinting put on the Jeep. And I say that because you're going to see the photos from the Jeep in July, and you'll see there's tinting on the windows, but you can still see into it. And so on September 25th, Alex Cox took that Jeep to Dan's Window Tinting in Rexburg, Idaho, and he paid $200 to put some of the darkest tint you could put on it.
Sure.
You'll see those
Thanks,
photos of
Heidi.
what that Jeep looked like afterwards. This is the first action of this defendant, Lori Vallow, in the conspiracy, loaning her brother this Jeep and allowing him to put on these dark tint to get it ready so he can lie in wait and no one could see him in the back with that rifle.
So that's an important symptom of premeditation. I think interesting question to ask is, if this was premeditated, and I think it was Charles's murder premeditated? And I think it was. And obviously, Tylee and JJ's premeditated as well. And of course, premeditated murder is the worst kind of murder, right? Planning to kill someone. And this is actually planning to kill relatives. All of these are relatives. All of them, it's Lori's children, both of them. Lori's Tammy Daybell arguably isn't a relative unless you consider her an in-law. Brandon as well, in a sense, but nevertheless, it's within a pretty tight family structure. So I want to, before we continue with these, with our opening statement, I just want to put a timeline in chat just so that you guys can see. This is like a serial killer. The very first murder was July, all of this is 2019, July 11, right? Charles Vallow. Then the next one, anyone know? Who was murdered next? Tylee on 9 September. That's Lori's daughter, right? Then JJ on September 22nd, right? Then Brandon Boudreaux attempted murder about 2 weeks later on October 2nd. Right? And then Tammy Daybell on just barely 2 weeks after that, October 19. So if you put all of those together, right, it's how many individuals? It's Charles Vallow, Tylee, JJ, Brandon Boudreaux, who wasn't killed, but they tried to kill him. And then the fifth one, Tammy Daybell. It's 5 people. And if you think about that, okay, Brandon Boudreaux wasn't murdered, but they did try to murder him. That's 5 people. That is well within the territory of a serial killer. And we should really think of Lori Vallow as not just a serial killer, but a serial killer of her own family, which is something I don't know if we've ever seen before. I don't think we've ever seen something that debauched, right? Thanks very much for that. Appreciate it. Thank you. And also thank you to Heidi. Appreciate it. Do you guys agree? The other thing that is incredible to think about is that all of this happens in such a short time, between July 11 and October 19. So it's July, August, September, October. Basically in 4 months, almost 5 people are murdered. That's like almost an average of 1 person a month for 5 months. And it all could have been prevented if they just responded with critical thinking and investigating the murder of Charles Vallow properly. And guess what? They took Lori Vallow's cue, and they accepted her version of events. And look at the mess we ended up in, right? Okay, I'm not going to try not to interrupt again.
It is her first mistake, using that Jeep and tying herself to the conspiracy and to the premeditation. Also on September 25th, you're going to learn that Lori Vallow and her accomplice, Alex Cox, went to the Walmart superstore in Idaho Falls. You're going to learn that's not far from Rexburg. And they purchased a burner phone. Now, a burner phone is a phone that you don't have to put your subscriber information to. And so, how do we know that Alex Cox was there and Lori Vallow was there? Well, you're going to learn they each had their own cell phone, like most of us do, and that Alex Cox's cell phone was utilizing Wi-Fi inside that Walmart at the time that burner phone was purchased with cash. And you'll learn that this defendant's cell phone that was subscribed to her was utilizing cell towers in the area of that Walmart at the time that that burner phone was purchased. Lori Vallow and Alex Cox knew that he would need a phone when he drove down here, but they knew you don't want to bring your own phone. It's a great, you'll be tracked, right? So they bought this burner phone so that Alex would have contact while he drove down here and away. But Alex made a mistake. Because like any other phone, you can still use a burner phone to access Google or your Gmail accounts. And you're going to learn that Alex accessed his Gmail account. In this investigation, you'll learn the police executed many, many search warrants, and one of them was on Alex Cox's Gmail account, homerjmaximus@gmail.com. You're going to learn that Alex searched for things like window tinting in Rexburg, that he searched for places to practice shooting ranges. You're going to learn that he searched different things about angles or trajectories of shots. You're going to learn that the day before, on October 1st and the morning of October 2nd, he searched 3875 East Phelps Street, where Brandon Boudreaux lived. You're going to learn that after the shooting, Alex Cox actually searched for directions on how to get away through a back road. He knew he hadn't killed Brandon. Brandon's calling 911, and so he searched for Pine Top, Holbrook, Moab, Utah, Fillmore, Utah, and eventually Idaho Falls as he made his way back through back roads. You're going to learn that the police also executed search warrants on this defendant's Gmail account, lollytimeforever@gmail.com. On September 30th, the day when her brother took her Jeep and started driving down to Arizona, she searched, quote, how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler. And she also searched a YouTube video, Jeep Wrangler JK rear seat removal, how to DIY YouTube video. This defendant continued to be a co-conspirator and to aid her accomplice, Alex Cox, by searching how to remove that back seat of the Jeep so he could better lie in wait to shoot Brandon. This was the defendant's second mistake, and more evidence of her being a co-conspirator and the premeditation.
Remember, Lori's accused of conspiracy to commit murder.
This defendant also, on September 30th, began aiding Alex by becoming his alibi. You'll hear from Nick Valance, who is an FBI agent who deals with cellular analysis, that around 4:30 p.m. on September 30th, Alex Cox's cell phone, the one that he subscribed to, moved from his apartment in this same complex where he and Lori Vallow lived to Lori Vallow's unit. And from then on, for the next couple days, Alex Cox's phone remained with this defendant. Meanwhile, that burner phone from that Idaho Falls Walmart on September 30th started moving towards Arizona.
That's huge, is the fact that Lori is providing him with an alibi, right? And he leaves her phone, he leaves his phone with her, takes another phone, but the fact is she's basically, the phone's with me, he was with me, and I'm your alibi, and you can just get away with this. It's kind of being very clever, but not clever enough, thinking you cleverer than you actually need to be, right?
You will hear that on October 2nd of 2019, at about 8 in the morning Arizona time, about an hour before the shooting, this defendant created the alibi. She had Alex Cox's phone call her phone to make it look like he was still in Rexburg, Idaho, instead of in Gilbert, Arizona. That fake call lasted about 24 minutes. Both of those cell phones were using the same cell tower in Rexburg, Idaho. This was Lori Vallow's third mistake. More evidence that she was a co-conspirator and of that premeditation to aid her brother in this shooting of Brandon Boudreaux.
So Lori effectively used his phone to call herself to establish his alibi.
So how do we know, though, that Lori Vallow's Jeep drove from Idaho to Arizona? Well, we're going to start by learning about what we call LPRs, or license plate readers. You will learn and see a photo of Lori Vallow's Jeep in Arizona on October 1st of 2019, up near Holbrook on the I-40.
How about telematics?
You'll hear that the DEA has a license plate reader there, and they took a photo of Lori Vallow's Jeep with that license plate LWD 0997 on its way to Gilbert, Arizona. You're also going to learn that the police later recovered that Jeep back up in Rexburg, and they did a couple different search warrants on it. And what they recovered inside the Jeep, among other things, was a receipt from October 1st of 2019 from Mesa, Arizona, the day before the shooting, from a restaurant called Los Favoritos out on Power Road.
Clumsy.
You're going to learn that at the time the burner phone is down here in Arizona. You'll learn that Alex Cox was using his Gmail and Googling an address on Power Road around the time when we then see the receipt. Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's Jeep, and Alex's rifle are here in Arizona waiting to commit this shooting. Meanwhile, up in Rexburg, on October 1st, this defendant does a little more additional help. She goes to a storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho, and rents unit C52. The next day, on October 2nd, when the shooting is happening down in Arizona, or after the shooting actually, she brings her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell, with her. And you will see video of this as she and Chad Daybell put the rear tire and the rear bench seat of that Jeep into the storage unit. Using the storage unit for that Jeep tire and that bench seat so that her co-conspirator, Alex, could lie in wait in the back of the Jeep waiting for Brandon to return home that morning. This is, again, evidence of that conspiracy and of the premeditation to kill Brandon. So October 2nd, the morning of this shooting, you will see that Alex Cox was Googling that address, 3875 East 4th Road. His burner phone from Idaho Falls, Idaho, is in Gilbert, Arizona. He's using his Gmail account, and he is using cell towers around Melanie Boudreaux's residence. Now, this is important because Melanie knew that Brandon had their kids. They had 4. She knew that Brandon that morning was going to have to drop off 3 of the kids at school and that they would exchange their youngest. They would meet at a park. Brandon would text Melanie, let her know he was there. She would respond, and they would exchange their youngest.
So it's interesting that the family dynamics contextually, sort of the family dynamics are that Melanie's not getting along with Brandon, right? Is that a coincidence?
Child. While Brandon was leaving his house to take his kids to school, that Idaho burner phone moves to his residence and begins waiting for him. Alex kept the Jeep running as he waited for Brandon to return. What Melanie didn't know was that Brandon was going to the gym after dropping off the kids, and so Alex had to wait longer. You'll hear that one of Brandon's neighbors noticed this Jeep. It's a neighborhood that doesn't have any real easy ingress or egress. You'll see a map of it. So there's very little through traffic. And so the neighborhood knows and recognizes most of the same cars. And you'll hear from a neighbor that as he was backing out, he saw this Jeep parked the wrong way on the road, nose to nose with another vehicle that he did recognize. He saw the dark tinting. He saw it was running, and he thought it just stood out as unusual in his neighborhood. It made him actually look into his rearview mirror to note it had a Texas license plate. This was about 30 plus minutes before Brandon arrived home. When Brandon got to the house that day, Alex was ready with the rifle. And we know that he was able to just lift up that back window because the tire wasn't on it. Alex fired one shot. Luckily, he did not hit Brandon. You will see that Brandon was driving a Tesla at the time. And unlike many cars, there's no frame around the window. The window just goes into the door, into the car itself. The shot hit the frame of the vehicle, but right where the window goes up into it. And you'll see that there is damage to the window as well as the bullet hole into the frame of the vehicle itself, right above Brandon's head.
Sure,
When he was
just missed
sitting
him.
in that driver's seat. You'll hear that when Brandon took off, the window remained in the door, that he drove away and then eventually circled back around and went into his driveway. You'll hear that for a Tesla, when you put the car in park, the door automatically opens and the whole window just shattered out.
The Tesla's also got multiple cameras. So I wonder whether they recorded anything.
Brandon was on the phone with 911 soon after the shooting. You'll hear that call, him actually sounding out of breath from the fear. And he waited for the police to arrive. Alex Cox, of course, is Googling how to get out of there and get back to Rexburg, Idaho. And by October 3rd, he was back there.
The next
That
day.
same day on October 3rd, you will see that Alex Cox and Lori Vallow went back to the storage unit. They removed that rear tire. They removed the rear seat of the Jeep and took it with them. You will again see video of that. You'll also see
Probably to
that they
reinstall
Googled
it,
that
right?
day, news in Gilbert, shootings of Brandon, to try to find out what the police
Thanks,
knew.
Sinead.
How did the police figure out that this defendant and Alex Cox were involved? Well, when the police were interviewing Brandon, they asked him if he had any enemies. Who would want to do this? And Brandon told the police the only people he could think of was Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. He told them that Lori had lived in Texas and that the Jeep had a Texas license plate. And he told them about that incident.
that's the advantage to surviving your own murder. You know, someone asks you, who do you think tried to murder you? And you can say, well, I think it's who it is. And in this case, it was.
On July 11th of 2019 in Chandler involving Lori Vallow and Alex Cox, and he believed this was all tied together. You'll hear that the Gilbert police reached out.
Now, imagine how scary it must be for Brandon. He knows that Charles Vallow is dead. He probably suspects what he suspects, and he's just survived what he's just survived, and there's this Texas license plate. You know, think how chilling that must be. It's not just, ooh, I wonder if someone tried to kill me. It's someone is already dead, and you know, this attempt on his life was also following the disappearance of both of Lori's kids. So on paper, he would have been their fourth murder victim. He was damn lucky.
The Chandler Police Department and learned about that Jeep with the Texas plates, LWD 0997, the same plate that was seen on that license plate reader on October 1st coming into Arizona. The Gilbert police learned that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox were living in Rexburg, Idaho, and they reached out to law enforcement there. You'll hear that on November 1st, police in Idaho went to 565 Pioneer Road, that apartment complex, and they saw Lori Vallow, they saw Alex Cox, and they saw Chad Daybell. They didn't see the Jeep that day. And so they went back a few days later on November 4th and saw the Jeep located near Lori Vallow's residence. Tires back on it, rear seat is back in it.
Windows
You'll
still
hear that they
tinted, though.
impounded it. And on November 18th, the Gilbert police flew to Idaho to process it. You're going to learn about GSR, or gunshot residue. You're going to learn that they process the vehicle. Basically, they're little sticky kits. GSR is microscopic. You can't see it. So you try to collect it, and then you give it to an expert to look through it. You will hear that those kits were sent to the Phoenix Police Department and reviewed, and that particles indicative of gunshot residue were located on the kits that were tested from the rear of that Jeep Wrangler, and that this is consistent with a gun being fired from the rear of the Jeep. You also hear that the Gilbert Police Department collected DNA from areas like the steering wheel, the gear shift, seatbelt buckles, and that they got a blood blot from Alexander Cox. DNA profiles were created from the steering wheel and other areas around the driver's seat. And the DNA was found to be a mixture, multiple people, but the major contributor was Alexander Cox. Again, you will hear that the police executed multiple search warrants on cell phones, cell tower usage, data from Gmail accounts, and data from iCloud accounts. You will see a map of Lori Vallow's cell phone, Alex Cox's cell phone, as well as that burner phone from that Walmart in Idaho Falls.
Okay, so do you notice from the back, Lori's chair is rotating slightly. It's going slightly like that. Do you notice?
The one that was associated to Alex Cox's Gmail account.
Do you know what is actually happening there? And this to me is the interesting part of true crime. I also want to talk about the difference between the murder of Charles and the difference between the murder of, or the attempted murder of Brandon. What do you think is going on when someone is sitting in a chair like that in this context and the chair is doing that? What do you think is going on? Anyone know?
You will hear from Nick Valance from the FBI, and he'll show you how that burner phone went from Rexburg, Idaho, down to Gilbert, Arizona, was there for the shooting,
No, it's
and
not
returned
moving.
back to
Let's just go
Rexburg,
back
and was never allowed
a little.
accounts. You will see a map of Lori Vallow's cell phone, Alex
We
Cox's cell
agree
phone,
it's
as well as
doing
that
that,
burner phone
right?
from that Walmart in Idaho Falls. The one that was associated to Alex Cox's Gmail account.
Now, in terms of psychology, what are we dealing with here? Has anyone thought about this? Someone says she's nervous, someone says antsy, nervousness. Okay, that's part of it. What's actually going on here is self-soothing, right? We have different ways of dealing with our nervousness. Some will bite their nails, some will play with their hair. And yeah, that's it, self-soothing. So yeah, there is nervousness going on, but that is an attempt to self-soothe, and it's kind of subconscious. It's kind of like a child version of Laurie that is almost like rocking her own cradle, that is just trying to soothe her in what is admittedly a very stressful situation. If you have murdered someone and someone is telling a whole group of people on camera what a bad person you are going to want to feel a little bit of soothing. But there's no mommy and there's no person to sort of give you a hug. And so this is what's going on. It's self-soothing taking place. It's just interesting to see that, because the self-soothing is, as you rightly point out, a response to nerves and anxiety. But it's also important to recognize what forms of self-soothing there are. Sometimes it's that in a chair, and sometimes you'll just have ordinary witnesses who not necessarily committed a crime who do the same thing. It's just interesting to observe. When you are self-soothing, it's also maybe a moment to reflect, wow, something might be really bothering you. And maybe the way to deal with it isn't to self-soothe, but to actually deal with it, right?
You will hear from Nick Valance from the FBI, and he'll show you how that burner phone went from Rexburg, Idaho, down to Gilbert, Arizona.
That's right.
Was there for the shooting and returned back to Rexburg, and was never used again after that. You will learn that the only phone number that burner phone called or received calls from.
That is significant, the fact that the burner phone was used then and never again. You know, it was used specifically for that incident.
Was Chad Daybell, this defendant's soon-to-be husband. The same phone, of course, that was using those cell towers right around Brandon's home at the time of the shooting. This defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, has been charged with conspiracy to commit the first-degree murder of Brandon Boudreaux on October 2nd of 2019. The evidence in this case will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant conspired with Alex Cox and others to kill Brandon. She provided the means, the Jeep, she helped get the Jeep ready, and she tried to provide an alibi for her co-conspirator. At the end of this trial, the state will ask you all to hold this defendant accountable and find her guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Thank you.
Would the defense like to give an opening statement at this time?
Okay, before Laurie has her turn, what did you think about the opening statement? What did you think about how that was done from Trina Kay? I thought it was fairly brief, appropriately brief, right? Concise. It almost feels like, what possible defense could Laurie have given all of these facts? And I think it's quite simple. It is, she didn't actually commit the crime and she's a good person. So it's like, I wasn't there, you know, someone else did. How can you prove that I said anything to anyone? Blah, 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 that whole thing. Basically, I'm a good person. One thing that I think is missing from this argument is the motive, which is greed, which is that Brandon Boudreaux also had a life insurance policy. Charles worked in life insurance. And life insurance is really the motive in a way for all of the murders, not the children, but I mean, it's the same concept that you're getting money. Um, I mean, Laurie's not acknowledging or admitting or communicating that her children are dead. She's still getting social security checks. So it's still that thing of you getting money, but a person is dead. It's like within the context of that. But it's certainly in terms of Charles Vallow, Tammy Daybell, and Brandon Boudreau, all of that was life insurance. And the fact that Charles worked in life insurance just shows how Laurie's thinking, just like a one-track mind, like money for your life kind of thing. So I do think what's missing from her opening was to talk about the motive. The other thing that I think is interesting is there any question that there's self-defense going on here? And what I think is fascinating to think about is Alex Cox murdered Charles Vallow in July, right? This was his fourth murder, attempted murder, and you can tell he didn't want to do it the same way he did it with Charles Vallow. In other words, he didn't want to stand man to man and then afterwards have to deal with the police and explain himself and deal with all of that. This time he wanted to do it covertly, not overtly. This time he wanted to pretend not to be there. He wanted to hide himself from the scene, and he found out that that wasn't so simple, right? Okay, are we ready for Laurie? Hi, Vanessa, good to see you. So you guys do know the background. Laurie was saying that she was too sick to attend trial, and the judge basically twisted her arm and basically said, you need to show up. Do you think when you listen to Laurie now, see whether you think she seems to be sick? Does she have a sore throat? Does she seem not well? How well does she do in her opening? And does she do better than she did during the previous trial? Thanks very much, Linda Garris. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, here we are at trial. And the judicial system can be difficult to understand at times. There are laws and rules and statutes that govern how things will proceed in this trial. You yesterday got to hear the preliminary jury instruction, so you kind of got an order of how things are going to go. In order for someone to be charged with a crime, as I have been.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to argument versus an opening statement.
That didn't take long.
I'll remind the defendant, an opening statement should be a preview of what is to be expected at trial. So go ahead.
That law enforcement presents evidence that they gather, and the state prosecution.
You notice how she just carries on reading a statement like, you said something, I'm just going to keep going regardless. Now, I don't know, my personal impression is she seems a little red-faced and her voice sounds a little husky. So I sort of feel like she might be a little ill. Not too ill to present, but maybe a little ill. What do you guys think? Her voice, there does seem to be something in her voice. Do you agree? No, the jury doesn't know of her previous convictions, which I find, I mean, legally, that's probably proper, but the fact is she is previously convicted. So it just shows you to what extent the law believes in this whole idea of you should be presumed innocent and given a fair trial. You know, that's quite a benefit and an altruistic approach from the law, where the law says, you know, we're going to try very hard to give you all the advantages we can, because we don't want to falsely accuse you. We don't want to falsely convict you. the law is trying to be fair, right? Okay.
Prosecutors are going to present that to you.
That is true. Heidi says she does seem sick. Sharon, that's true. She was checked out medically and was determined to be well enough. I'm just saying, I do think she is maybe a little bit under the weather, right?
Sometimes the state charges a defendant with a crime. They have charged me with a crime, a very serious crime. Sometimes they take the allegations to a grand jury to decide if the defendant
I'm going
should
to
be
object
charged.
again, Your Honor. Improper
That's,
argument. Asked to strike.
Hold on. The jury should disregard that last comment. How the charges arrived here are not for the jury's consideration. The prior proceedings are not for the jury's consideration. Please proceed.
The state or the prosecution
Just
will
continue to
then
read.
take the information gathered, the evidence from law enforcement, and present to you a story, a theory, their hypothesis of what happened. In this case, the prosecutor was not present during this alleged crime.
So can you see how she's thinking about it in a very simplified way? I'm not saying she's completely wrong, but I mean, she's a convicted murderer on trial for another attempted murder. And you know, the fact that she can look at this and say, it's a competition of storytelling, and I'm going to, guess what, I'll just win that competition. I'll just tell you a better story. In a sense, she's right. But of course, there's the other side of it, which is also there are facts that you've got to include in your story. And if you can't include facts, you're going to get into trouble. You've got to tell a better story that includes facts. I think she missed that part.
The Gilbert Police Department was not present during this alleged crime, so it is their job to fill in the gaps, make up a theory, and present it to you, the jury, at trial. This is their job. They are not witness to the actual events because they weren't there that day with Brandon at the house when this alleged shooting occurred. This case is about a conspiracy. And a conspiracy is when two or more people make an agreement to commit a crime. They have to willingly and knowingly participate. Conspiracy is an ancient word that appears in the Bible on many occasions.
You get the feeling that the way Laurie is preaching to the jury is the way that she would preach to her sort of cult following, which is using text, you know, that is true, but excerpts of it to support the story that she wants to tell in a dishonest and manipulative way.
Judas conspired against Jesus with the chief priests for
I'm going to
30 pieces of silver.
object to, unless this is being presented at trial, I'm not sure that this is appropriate opening.
How many objections is that now? Is it three or four?
What is the legal objection?
Well, you're arguing. The opening statement is not argument. I'm going to allow it briefly, but I may cut you off depending on where you're going with that.
Cain conspired against Abel, his brother. This case is a case of conspiracy. The charge against me is that I conspired with my brother, Alex Cox, to murder my niece's husband, Brandon Boudreau. But you will find, as you begin to see the evidence put forth in this case, that there was not any animosity between Brandon and myself. I personally did not have any motivation to have harm come to Brandon. In fact, Brandon and I had a very friendly relationship all of the time that I have known him.
So do you see she's at this point touching on motive? I didn't have any motive, and that is a little bit of a flaw in the prosecutor's opening. Now, I don't know the law well enough. I'd love to say that I did, but I don't know if I know the law well enough where I'm not sure if you're allowed to talk about motive where it's attempted murder. You didn't actually murder someone. So I don't know whether you can technically provide a motive where someone isn't murdered. I think it's nevertheless there's a motive for that action. But I do think this is a bit of a strength in her opening where she's saying, what motive could I possibly have? Well, greed, money, and that does come up, I think, on as early as day 2 anyway.
Him. I first met Brandon when he was marrying my niece Melanie.
And Your Honor, I'm going to object to, unless the defendant's
Hold
testifying.
on. Can I have the parties approach briefly?
So, well, I'll just let them do that so
Can we
long.
approach briefly?
I just want to respond to this comment from Linda. Sick people don't need a motive. I disagree with that in the sense it basically lets us off the hook to say we don't need to understand who these people are. We don't need to figure out. In other words, it's almost like if you were the juror, oh, don't give me any more evidence, guilty. That's not appropriate. Um, uh, Everyone has a motive, no matter how much you don't like them, no matter how much you disagree with them. Every person, even I've got a dog that's on the floor here. The dog has a motive for pretty much everything it does. There are things that make a dog very excited, and there are things he doesn't want to do. And I think when you take that out of the equation, where you say, I don't need to know why someone wanted to do something, you are self-limiting not only your understanding of true crime, but in a way how the lesson that you can take out of the thing, right? And I'm not trying to sort of, Linda just made this comment. I'm not trying to pick on you or anything. What I'm trying to do is alert you to there's a treasure trove of value that we can get out of true crime if we can go into these dark and dangerous places where we think about things that are very human. Why do people do what they do? Instead of just sort of sitting back in a way and saying, you bad, I'm good, you guilty, I'm good, you sleazy and horrible. And basically just that thing where you have this sort of gratified sense of being better than someone else because someone else is worse. And I see that a lot in true crime, and I see that a lot with other creators. All we're going to do is sit here and point fingers at how evil and scummy and horrible somebody else is and feel good about that. That is like kindergarten true crime. And although I think a lot of people enjoy that, then we know better than these criminals in a way. If we simply treat other people as inferior to ourselves. I think a better way of doing all of this is to understand human psychology. And when we do that, we stand a good chance of understanding ourselves and understanding our situation and actually using something tragic and broken and dysfunctional to edify our